Hello, everyone. Welcome to PwC Tax Bite podcast series. My name is Peter, and I'm very happy to welcome Jean-Philippe van West in my virtual recording studio. Now, Jean-Philippe is well known to the audience, but for those who do not know Jean-Philippe is a senior counsel in our team, but also works quite a bit of his time with university, teaching, and academic work. And the reason I invited Jean-Philippe in my recording studio is because Jean-Philippe organized this week, again, the International Tax Webinars from PwC Belgium. And a lot of companies attended those virtual webinars on various international topics. But I still wanted to get his take from all the webinars. And so, Jean-Philippe, maybe just to start, for those in the audience who are not familiar with the webinar series that you have been organizing for several years already, can you explain what it actually is and what was the topic this year?
In a row that we organize these international tax webinars on a regular basis, so several webinars a year. And the purpose of these webinars is that, well, as most of you know, the international tax landscape is rapidly moving. So many developments at different levels. So you have the EU level, you have at the level OECD. Of course, there are some countries have a big impact, such as the US, on international tax policy, but now as well the UN. So different fronts to monitor, and that's exactly what we want to do with this international tax webinar. So on a consistent base. Bring these topics so that so the listeners can monitor, follow these topics together with us, and the purpose is twofold. So on the one hand, we try to get the broader picture, so the broader picture, but as well specific focus on the specific expert knowledge, on the deeper dive on certain topics. And so that's why we have a deeper team behind these international tax webinars. So we have the overall view, but as well then this dedicated topic experts who together with me organize these webinars. The overarching title of this session was Navigating Shifts in Global Tax Policy, the implications for businesses, of course. Although that the webinars are open to everyone, there's, of course, important to make the translation of that's what is going on, but that's then the relevance for business. And during this webinar, what we then in particular did is had a look at what happened over the last 3 months since the last webinar that took place in June.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Jean-Philippe. So there were 3 webinars this week about shifts in global tax policy. So shifts, that's quite impactful, interesting. Can you tell a bit more about that? What were these shifts that you looked into in the webinar?
Yes, of course. And I think if we take a step back and take a look at the broader picture, one can see that with the BEPS project, and then later on I had BEPS 1.0, later on Pillar 1, Pillar 2, they tried to find global solutions, there are multilateral solutions to international tax problems, as taxation of the digital economy, base erosion and profit shifting, with that the creation of this inclusive framework. So let's say multilateralism was there, finding multilateral solutions to these problems. However, if you look at the last year, and I will not go in all the details, but maybe if you start at the end of last year, beginning of this year, we saw several important developments. So we had end of last year, but then continue this year, developments on the UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. So already 2022-23 that the UN said they tried to create a more inclusive forum. And I said, well, at the OECD inclusive framework, the voices of developing countries are not sufficiently taken into account. So they want to create a separate forum. That took really further a lot of progress was made in 2024, now 2025. So that was important development. Of course, another one is that with the US and with respect Pillar 2, Pillar 1, so the global tax deal. And you might remember those, that's just in January 2025, the OECD released no guidance on Pillar 2, but then of 1 week later, there was when there was the inauguration of Trump, President Trump, there was immediately this executive order where they said, well, the US will no longer participate, no longer support in this global tax deal. So that was UN, US. Then at EU level, we saw in 2024, which already announced in the political agenda of von der Leyen in her speeches. Well, there will be a shift to improving the competitiveness of the EU, which resulted at the beginning of 2025 in the publication of the EU competitiveness compass. So kind of a shift from, let's say, addressing fair taxation, so the focus on BEPS, towards more improving competitiveness of the EU. And then if you take these three developments, so the UN, the US, the EU, you can say that of course, on the one hand, you have the UN trying to find more inclusive, still going for this multilateralism. But at the end, what we see in practice is a big shift towards more unilateralism and more protective measures, where, as I said, on one hand, you have the US, but as well the EU trying to focus more on improving its competitiveness.
Okay, yeah, quite a bit of developments over the past 3 months, Jean-Philippe. So not easy probably to squeeze that all into even 3 webinars. 3 webinars, 3 hours, 4 hours of content. I'm not going to ask you to repeat everything in this podcast, but maybe, it would be interesting to get your takeaway. Let's see, your key summary of these key developments, Jean-Philippe. So a little challenge for you to do that in this short podcast.
Yes, indeed. But maybe let me start with highlighting some of these important developments, because I find different from last year's. It has been busy, like all over summer. So it started with the end of June with this G7 statement on a side-by-side approach for Pillar 2 related to this US Section 899. So that was end of June. Then mid of July, some other important developments. So 16th of July, we had this proposal for a multi-annual financial framework of 2 trillion euros, which as this multi-annual financial framework, let's say the long-term EU budget. And in that one, there was, of course, again, new EU own resources, where they wanted to have, where there was a proposal to have a new contribution from large multinationals. We discussed it during the webinars. The proposal would probably not make it, because a lot of discussions still have to take place. But as well, we saw immediately some opposition there, but was an important development. As well, mid of July, we had this decision of the Belgian Constitutional Court with respect to the Pillar 2 case related to the UTPR, and whether this was the Belgian UTPR is constitutional. Well, whereas many might have thought, well, the courts will decide this case inadmissible, it decided to ask a preliminary ruling to the Court of Justice of the EU. So as well, bringing the question or the debate on the validity of the UTPR, which until now mainly took place in academic debate or a policy debate. Now there will be the highest courts of the EU will have to take a decision on the constitutionality of this UTPR, and then the constitutionality under the EU constitution, as under EU primary law. Then July as well, important developments on the EU-US trade deal. So they're trying to agree on a new trade deal. So that's as well end of July, continuing in August and still now. As well, August, we saw this on this G7 statement. So agreement between 7 states, the head of states of 7, the 7th largest economies. Well, if you want to find a solution there, of course, you need to have more states on board. So that has to be discussed within the OECD inclusive framework. Well, there in August, confidential OECD documents were leaked, press releases on that. And then as well as August, you had these meetings in New York at the UN level on this international framework agreement on tax cooperation. So there's well lots of developments throughout the months. So yeah, if you were on holidays or if you don't have time to follow these developments on a daily basis, this might have been very challenging to catch up with all developments. And that was then the purpose of this webinar series to bring all these developments together and explain them to the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Jean-Philippe. And maybe if you're in the audience now and you think next time I would like to attend these webinars, and you let us know. We can add you to a mailing list if you missed the invite on social media or other platforms. Let us know, and you get the invite firsthand next time. But okay, maybe continuing a little bit the challenge. If you were in the audience of all of the webinars, Jean-Philippe, what do you think people should remember from the webinars? And I'm not giving you 1 hour to summarize this, so that's a challenge.
I will try to be brief and in a few minutes capture the highlights. And let's try to do this topical, so on the different trends or topics. First one is the growing importance of tariffs and trade. So, according to me, when I look at this, the international trade landscape is extremely volatile. So you see rapid changes, whereas now normally this international, according to my understanding, this trade agreements, it takes a long time to negotiate them and so on. So you can be prepared for them. Now it's extremely volatile with tariffs happening overnight. So you need to be a very good understanding of the flow of your goods, of your business models, and the potential impact of tariffs on your business model. So related to, let's say, if you do organize your tax planning, I think besides that you need to have your international tax aspects, your transfer pricing. I think now trade and tariffs is something that you need to include and monitor as well in setting up your tax planning. And closely related to this trade and tariffs are the discussions on Pillar 1, or of now as you know that Pillar 1 is likely not happening. There is still this unresolved issue of taxing the digital or digitalized economy, and related to that, the reaction with DSTs. So some countries include adopted DSTs are considering adopting this. Well, then there might be countermeasures related to that. So that's important one to monitor. Pillar 1 DSTs. Let's then second block move to Pillar 2. So lots of discussions on both the challenge, the legal challenge, the case before the Constitutional Court now referred to the Court of Justice of the EU. Policy discussions, you see more and more business organizations as well politicians say, well, we should stop with Pillar 2 or put it on hold at least. Others say, no, we should continue. Then you have the discussions on the G7 agreements and the side-by-side deal there. But these are policy discussions then. But for the moment, the Pillar 2 train just continues, and the legislation is there, and our business still need to be ready to comply with the rules. So the legislation is out there in the EU, but as well outside the EU. Legislation must be followed, so their business must be ready. And related to that one is that we see an increase, or like let's say increase of needs, or at least a work on cooperative compliance programs. So as well, both in Belgium and in Belgium, we see there is a new push to cooperative compliance, but as well this week at EU level, the ETACA, so it's the EU cooperative compliance program. There as well meetings were taking place, and as well they will give this a new push. So that with respect to Pillar 2. A third block, the UN. At the UN, as I said, meetings took place in August. Focus was on 3 different work streams. You have on the first work stream on the Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation, the second work stream on taxation of income derived from the provision of cross-border services in an increasingly digitalized and globalized economy, and the third block on preventing and reducing tax disputes. I will not go into the details here. Let's say discussions are ongoing. The UN has a very strict timeline. So next meetings taking place in November, then as well beginning 2026. So far, I find the outcome is not very tangible yet, in a sense that you don't have like hard law yet. But what you see there is that they have a clear timeline. Process is ongoing, and the outcome has potentially can have a significant impact. So if there's still doubts whether this project will be successful or not, but if so, the impact can be important. So that is something important to monitor, and that we will continue monitor. And then, if I can have 1 more minute, last level, of course, the EU level, because of course we look at all these developments through an EU lens. I can say that if you take these developments on tariffs, on Pillar 2, and at UN level, then you notice immediately that the EU has to dedicate a lot of resources to handle all these developments. So they have to monitor how the side-by-side approach that is proposed within the G7, how does the interaction with the Pillar 2 directive, as well the tariffs, of course, the EU-US trade deal, very high on the agenda. And as well the UN, so the EU or the EU member states still going to these meetings, providing input there. So a lot of resources going there, which sometimes I take, so the EU puts tax improving its competitiveness on as a key priority. There as well, with respect to taxation, as it's the buzzword tax decluttering is a priority. So far, we didn't see too much of that yet. Of course, they're thinking of this. They're questioning their questionnaires ongoing, so that you can provide stakeholders can provide input. But it will be important to monitor how they will manage this decluttering, because it's not an easy task to do, I think, but there's certainly a need for this. And so that will be a challenge, I think, to RIC. So a bit a challenge for the EU to implement. So this policy shift to improving the competitiveness, to really realize this agenda. Will be interesting to how this will continue the months to come. So that were a bit my takes, the 4 blocks. But Peter, maybe a question for you now. Do you think that these topics are actually on the agenda of companies? Do you often have of discussions with your clients on this? So maybe would be interesting to hear your insights on these developments.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jean-Philippe. Well, I must say it was impressive how you summarized 4 hours of content in just a few minutes, but well done. Now, on the relevance, I think, yes, it's extremely relevant, all these topics. And the feedback that I get from companies that attend the webinars is that really the biggest challenge is to keep track of all these developments and not to miss out on something. With everything that is ongoing, massive inflow of information, having just dedicated, structured overview of these developments is important. And of course, many companies will be in one of these topics in all the depths already. If you are a health industry sector company, you will know about tariffs, and probably the overview in the webinar may be relatively high level then, but the benefit is not that you get a deep dive on all the topics, but more like a structured overview. And for those companies in need of more detailed information, of course, we also organize the master classes for that. So I think I get positive feedback on this. Indeed, these are the topics that are relevant. The relative importance of the topics depends a bit on the industry and the sector, of course, that you're active in. But I think we touch on the right topics here. So Yeah, thanks, Jean-Philippe, for this. I think it was useful to have this summary at the end of the webinar week. When should people expect the next edition? What's the frequency of your webinars?
So the next webinar will probably be either end of January, beginning of February. So we expect lots of developments on several fronts here, on both Pillar 2 level, the G7 implementation of this G7 agreement on a side-by-side deal, trade and tariffs, so the EU-US trade deal. Progress there as well, the EU negotiating trade deals with other countries. So there as well, the UN has upcoming meetings. So we have certainly again a full agenda end of January, beginning of February to update you again on these developments.
Well, thank you for that. And I would say if you're in the audience and you would like to be invited directly for the next webinars, or you want any further information on the topics that Jean-Philippe just summarized, we have lots of materials I think that we can share with you. Reach out to us and I'm sure we can help you. And with that, Jean-Philippe, thank you for joining me in the podcast, and thank you for the audience for tuning in. Thank you.